Welcome to the Church of Thomas, Moses and the Red Sea, 5:13:11. I have found many wonderful stories in the Bible that often seem totally out of bounds, very hard to explain, maybe even no explanation possible. But occasionally there will be something that was a story that was explained in the way of the time that may have had a kernel of information in it that can help us decide whether this was all myth or an allegory to teach a lesson, or if it had a kernel of history in it. One of the things I find is fascinating is occasionally you do find things that are found or discovered or thought about and analyzed and then tested, and it shows up that yes, it could have happened, and then an explanation is forthcoming. One of the ways that they explain the idea of Moses crossing the Red Sea is that it's very easy to move water with wind. I know for a fact because I've been in numerous hurricanes, including Ike. Rita was another one that hit Galveston, and I was there also. When Rita was coming in to Galveston, it looked like the hand of God was holding back the water. What it was doing is it was going around the island, but the wind was blowing offshore. Because of the edge of the storm that was hitting us, the wind from the hurricane was actually working against the storm surge. And we're talking a 10 or 15 foot wall of water here. On the other hand, Ike was a different situation, where basically huge amounts of water were piled up onto the land and behind the island of Galveston. And then when the back end of the storm started blowing, it was blowing the opposite direction. So 25 or 30 feet of water was now being pushed back over the island. So I know that wind can create a huge impact on a massive amount of water. So that all by itself is interesting. But apparently some scientists have been looking at the generalized region, and they have found a marshy area that during certain kinds of wind events, the wind can blow 63 miles an hour. Well, that's not hurricane force, but in a shallow area, that would make a big impact as well. Well, apparently, let me see, the formula called for 63 mile per hour wind blowing steady for 12 hours total. It would push back a 6-foot deep puddle of water, and it remained open in their simulation for 4 hours. The dry area that was in this neck of water that they had simulated the pushback was 3 to 4 kilometers, or 2.5 miles by 5 kilometers, which is about 3 miles in dimensions. That's a huge amount of area. You could create some muddy spots that didn't have any water to wade through. You could get through. This was from a news story that was 9/21/10, the Washington Reuters network, the National Center for Atmospheric Research in the University of Colorado. So we're not talking about some fringe group that went out and went, okay, let's plug in some numbers and make a simulation that does what we want. They actually tested the ability of wind to move water of certain distances, and then they found a geographical location that it could be done in. And it's right where it could be done. We're not talking about the very wide area that is called the Red Sea. It's in a slightly narrower area, but it does work in the simulation. So let's renew our our familiarity with Moses crossing the Red Sea. So we're looking at Exodus 14, 13 through 14. But Moses said to the people, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm and see the deliverance of the Lord will accomplish for you to this day. For the Egyptians who you see today you shall never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to keep still." In Exodus 14, 21 through 27. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. The Lord drove back the sea with a strong cast of wind all night, and turned the sea to dry land, and the waters were divided. The Israelites went into the sea on the dry ground, and the waters formed a wall for them on their right side and on their left. The Egyptians pursued and went into the sea after them, all of Pharaoh's horses, chariots, and chariot drivers. At the morning watch, the Lord in the pillar of fire and cloud that looked down upon the Egyptian army and threw the Egyptian army into panic. He clogged their chariot wheels so that they turned with difficulty. The Egyptians said, "Let us flee from the Israelites, for the Lord is fighting for them against Egypt." And then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea, so that the water may come back upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots, and upon their chariot drivers." And so Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at the depth of the sea returned to its normal depth. And as the Egyptians fled before it, the Lord tossed the Egyptians into the sea. If Moses had inspiration and insight from God as to when this would happen, and this area was a narrow place where the wind was known to blow, Moses may have known that this was a way to get across. Obviously, blowing all night long was definitely 12 hours. I think that this simulation that was done with the University of Colorado and the National Center for Atmospheric Research holds some very interesting insights into the historical relevance of the parting of the Red Sea. God bless the whole world, no exceptions. Ancient